It's Thursday, March 26th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. We continue our coverage of the COVID-19 outbreak with my guest Anthonine Pierre, Deputy Director of the Brooklyn Movement Center, and Clyanna Lightbourn, Statewide Civil Rights Organizer of Citizen Action New York. They're going to be speaking with me about how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting incarcerated New Yorkers. As coronavirus spreads throughout New York City, advocates are letting their voices be heard about conditions in the city's jails and prisons. With reported little access to things like hand sanitizer and visitations halted, many are shedding a light on the treatment of inmates. The city's Department of Corrections reports that as of March 25th, 75 inmates have tested positive for COVID-19. This week, Mayor Bill de Blasio released 300 non-violent inmates on Rikers Island. And yes, we're so glad that you're with us today. Still working from home in my Bronx apartment. Everything's been going great. Only going in the office 2 times a week. If you know, we came out today. You can pick up the paper if you would like. Just be careful. And you can also look at our stories on our website at amsterdamnews.com. One of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, and just to make a note, we're doing it twice a week now, Mondays and Thursdays, is that one of the missions of the New York Amsterdam News is that we like to cover stories and do things that a lot of people in mainstream media are not talking about. And so when we're talking about inmates, when we're talking about children, we're talking about black people in this country, in this city, even in our neighborhoods, those are some of the most vulnerable people. We've been talking a lot about are we getting equal care? Are we getting equal protections? Because everybody, is a human at the end of the day. COVID-19 coronavirus does not discriminate, but like NAACP President Derek Johnson said on our last episode, policy does. And so we definitely want to make sure that everybody's protected no matter what color they are. And of course, as a black media outlet, we want to make sure that our folks are being taken care of. My guests today are Anthonine Pierre, Deputy Director of Brooklyn Movement Center, and Clyanna Lightbourn, Statewide Civil Rights Organizer of the Citizens Action New York. They're with me to discuss this ongoing situation involving the city's inmates. Welcome to the podcast, ladies. How are you?
Hey, all right.
So,
how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm, working at home like a lot of other folks, and such a confusing time for a lot of people. But I'm so glad you're both on to discuss some issues that not a lot of people are talking about. First, I want to talk a little bit about this digital rally and press conference that you all had, calling on black elected officials to save black lives during the pandemic. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So New York State is in a really interesting place. Obviously, we're all going through this pandemic, and in New York State, the budget is due April 1st, and the governor and the state senate have decided that in trying to pass this budget during a pandemic, they also want to undo the reforms that bail reform advocates did last year. And people may, for folks who are listening and maybe aren't advocates and organizers and always in conversations about bail, what the bail reforms did was basically make it so that there were far less people being held in jails pre-trial. And remember, people who are being held on bail are not people who've been convicted of a crime. They're people who've been arrested. They've been accused of a crime. So we wanted to and I say we, we're talking about folks like my organization, Brooklyn Movement Center, Clyanna's organization, Citizen Action New York, but really folks who are a part of an organization called Black Freedom Project, which is doing statewide work with black organizers, really sat down and said, look, we need to make sure that bail reform doesn't get rolled back, particularly because black and brown folks are the folks who are most likely to be held on bail. And that we know that the issue with bail is that it's a money issue, right? It means that if you're a poor person and you get accused of a crime like Khalif Browder, you could spend up to 3 years in jail before even ever seeing a judge. So we had this press conference because we think it's ridiculous to be in the middle of a pandemic and to be having a conversation about civil rights and freedoms and the ability for black folks to be able to move about freely at a time when everyone is really concerned about your health.
Right. And I know that you did actually have Khalif Browder's brother, Akeem, during that digital rally and press conference it was last week, correct? Or was it Monday? When did you have it?
Yeah, it was last week, Thursday.
Last week, okay.
And
so
we really stood up to say, look, we have black leadership in the Senate. We have black leadership in the Assembly of New York State. And our assembly leaders have been really awesome and have held the line and said we're not going to roll back bail at this point. But we really wanted to make clear to our Black senators, like, look, there are Black people across the state. We had folks on the press conference from Buffalo, from Hudson Valley, from Long Island, to really say we need Black folks to save Black lives right now.
All right. And, it's interesting. We had the president of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, on the last episode that we did, and he was talking about that, he has a plan, or still has a plan, where he wants to include Blacks and make sure that our Black elected officials and all elected officials are really taking care of the problems that Black people are going through during this pandemic. And one of the things on there was about the care and safety of inmates. And I want to segue into that because the Mayor de Blasio, he released some inmates, quite a few as a matter of fact. Tell me your feelings about that. Should there be more? And, why is it so important to have more out there so that we can make sure that our prisons, because we've seen in the news that there's coronavirus in the prisons. It's just a fact. But tell me your reaction to that. And do you want more released?
There should absolutely be more people released from prison at this point. We know just from visits that jails are uniquely foresights for stopping or containing any kind of viral outbreaks. We see all the time that jails provide poor medical assistance for individuals who are chronically ill, who have asthma. There's data have been released that show that about 40% of individuals who are incarcerated have a chronic illness, and 20% have asthma, and those are essentially the target populations for this current coronavirus pandemic that we are experiencing. We know that about 38 people have that are currently incarcerated through New York City have been currently have been diagnosed with coronavirus. But we know that number is absolutely going to balloon because social distancing is virtually impossible when you are behind bars. We know that hand sanitizer is contraband due to the alcohol content.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. I did not know that.
Yes, yeah, because of the alcohol content, hand sanitizer is considered contraband. And we know that access to hygiene facilities, being able to wash your hands with soap and water and those kind of things, it's not common. You're just not able to do that all the time in prison. So we are going to see those numbers balloon. And we're just saying, please, for folks who are going to be susceptible to this, we just need to see humanity really shine in New York State right now. And the fact that Governor Cuomo and the Senate and so many folks in the Capitol right now are actually discussing jail rollbacks is just unconscionable. The fact that they are talking about putting more people in jail right now when we have to make sure that people are safe, and jails are the least safest place right now for folks. Yeah. It's absolutely unbelievable, especially for our Black communities. It is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, I think there's been a big conversation, when it comes to this in the Black community and coronavirus about arrest. And I think that last week, public advocate Jumaane Williams, was basically telling the police, listen, these broken window arrests, we can't have them because that's going to inflate our prison population. That's going to spread coronavirus even further. So it's so important that somebody's speaking out on behalf of brothers and sisters who are behind bars during this egregious pandemic that's just taking over the city. Tell me what you guys are hearing, either one of you are hearing about the conditions. I know you kind of touched on it just a little bit just now, but I want you to elaborate to folks because you just educated me on a whole slew of things that I didn't know about what's happening behind bars. I'm sure that you might know or you're communicating with folks that are in there. What are they saying about the conditions right now? I mean, we're being told to shelter in place. We're being told to social distancing, use soap and water, all these things. But again, like you said, I want you to elaborate a little more on what conditions are like for our inmates that are in the correction system right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been, I think what's been great about the advocacy community is we very quickly pivoted to doing these digital press conferences. Mm-hmm. And there have been some really awesome digital press conferences where we've heard actually audio from folks who are inside about what the conditions are like. And when it comes down to it, we're talking about one, I think if you personally or you don't have a family member who's been incarcerated, then you don't know that, like, they have to pay for things, right? Like, they have to pay for phone calls, right? And that, like, what's happened in the last couple of weeks because of the pandemic is that visits have stopped. So you have people who are incarcerated who used to be able to see their families, but their families can no longer travel to see them. They may or may not have money in their commissary to actually make phone calls. Mm-hmm. And then we heard of an incident that actually happened with, I want to say it was Erie County, but correct me, someone in the internet can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But there's a case where there were eight incarcerated folks who were actually harmed when they were trying to get into an infirmary and get tested because they were having symptoms, right? So, there's this Malcolm X quote that I love. It's like when America sneezes, like black folks catch a cold, right?
Absolutely.
And
yeah, absolutely.
If we want to think about Black New Yorkers, as hard as things are for Black New Yorkers right now in the pandemic, imagine for our Black folks, our brothers and sisters who are locked up, what it means for them to be locked up in quarters, to not be able to social distance, to not have the means. They can't stock up. They're eating whatever they get. Their immune systems are not being built up by having fresh vegetables and fresh food, right? So this isn't only when we talk about public health, incarceration deeply impacts public health because the state doesn't take good care of people who are incarcerated. So we want to always remember that, like, our folks who are incarcerated are not in good care in the hands of the state. And this is why it's important for us to get them out, because as much as we're talking about flattening the curve, the carceral curve is much higher, that much more people who are incarcerated are actually going to contract this disease. It's going to be contracted at a higher rate in our jails and prisons than it is for those of us who are outside and have the freedom and the means to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I just want to put some numbers out there. These numbers have probably changed since Tuesday, but as of Tuesday, there were 52 detainees at city jails that have tested positive for coronavirus, along with 30 staff members at the Department of Corrections who have tested positive for coronavirus as well. So it's just so many people in one place. And we all know how easy it's spread. It's spreading here in New York City so rapidly. And, interestingly enough, at Brooklyn Metropolitan, there was I'm sure there might be more now, or maybe not, I'm not sure. But they had the first coronavirus, confirmed case of coronavirus at a federal prison in the nation at Brooklyn Metropolitan. So this is just a terrible problem that we've got to fix. Well, you're telling us all this stuff, and I think it's amazing. And I know I'm getting a rise out of it. I know that people are listening are getting a rise out of it. What can we do to speak out, to fight, to make sure to keep abreast on what's going on? Because folks who are listening to this, some might have somebody who's in there, or they know someone who recently is going to be released or is released now. What can we do as citizens to advocate on behalf of our brothers and sisters who are behind bars right now dealing with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely call Governor Cuomo. You want to call his Albany office at 518-474-8390. And then we also want to call Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, also at her Albany office. Mm-hmm. And that number is 518-455-2585. Mm-hmm. And we really want to tell them we're in the middle of a pandemic. Do not plan to put more Black and brown people in jail.
Okay. Great information that a lot of our folks need to know. I want to segue into something you were talking about earlier, and that was the bail rollbacks. I know that there was a vote on that this week. Can you talk about that and give us some information on that so people can know what it is?
The bail, there wasn't a vote on bail rollback.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead. It's cool.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No one voted.
All right.
No votes yet. Thank goodness. No
Thank
votes
God.
yet.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what that is and how that's going and everything that we need to know about that.
Clyanna, you want to take this one?
Sure. So with the bail rollbacks right now, the major plan, so there's like a three-way discussion going on with bail rollbacks right now, and it's going between the governor, the Senate, the state Senate, and the Assembly. And right now, the governor and the state Senate are really pushing for the bail rollbacks. They want to add dangerousness and all cash bail, which sounds really good, but adding dangerousness would really skew the entire the entire system because what it would be doing is adding this undercurrent of racism, essentially, where we would be allowing judges to sit and determine whether or not an individual that stands in front of them for less than 5 minutes is safe to put back on the street. A lot of times, the judges don't reflect the populations in which they are judging. So we would see people going into jails for longer periods of time, not being allowed to go home and, see their families or fight their cases from the outside. So we are really pushing right now to make sure that doesn't happen. Again, the Senate and the governor are pushing for this, are pushing for a rollback where dangerousness is included. The Assembly, with the Speaker, Carl Heasey, is really working on protecting bail and keeping it as is. Right now, maybe you can speak a little better on this, Anthonine. I'm not sure that there has been major movements right now.
Yeah.
A lot of it isn't it's a lot of really detailed stuff, but
yeah, I mean, I think we're in a really good place in terms of this no rollbacks movement. I think that we have been pivoting very quickly to digital organizing, and there have been Black organizers from every part of the state, Albany, Buffalo, Hudson Valley, calling for this. And what we've also seen is more of a public outcry, right? So we saw that the New York Times editorial board over the weekend put out an article put out an op-ed saying that bail should not be rolled back. Bail reform should not be rolled back, especially in the middle of a pandemic, right? We also saw an op-ed from Sochi Namika at the New York State Working Families Party, right? So there are folks, and especially Black folks, who have a lot of experience in this work, who are just joining this freedom fight and making sure that we can stand up against Governor Cuomo and the state Senate and make sure that they don't roll back bail, and that, to Clyanna's points, that they don't actually put in things like dangerousness that make it seem as if it's not that bad, but actually making it so that bail is more restrictive than it was before the reforms.
Right. And I know there was actually a call to Black mothers who were gathered to call on their elected officials to reject any rollbacks on bail reform in the budget. So that right there, that happened yesterday. And so groups are mobilizing together to try and get this together so that no one has to suffer. So it's a movement that's going on that I think definitely needs more, that people need to know more about. So that they can understand that there are people working to have this. Well, I do want to ask you both, what are the next steps? Do you all plan on having more digital press conferences, more conference calls because this is not just an issue about prisons. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about in a lot of our podcasts that we kind of focus on are the issues that are affecting the Black community when it comes to COVID-19, all the way from adequate health care in our community to adequate testing for our community, all the way even to, whether or not our Black businesses are going to be taken care of in this recent $2 trillion stimulus package. But tell us your next steps with your organizations and this whole movement that's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we, the wild thing about this moment is that a month ago we were all doing all of our different work, and now for the foreseeable future, COVID-19 is going to affect everything that we do. So the Black Freedom Project is really committed and devoted to lifting up Black organizing and making sure that there's a clear Black agenda of organizations and organizers from all the different parts of the state really saying, look, these aren't, the progressive things, the progressive policies that Black people in New York City need are not only needed by Black folks in New York City, but that they're needed by folks in Kingston, that they're needed by folks in Syracuse, that they're needed by folks in Hempstead. So we want to be really clear about that. And that means for us moving forward from this moment means exactly what you're saying, right? It means stopping to have conversations with our organizers, with our members to say, what's the Black agenda that we need to call for in New York State in this moment? What are the most pressing issues, right? Is it supporting our healthcare workers? Is it supporting our homeless folks, right? Like, what is it that actually needs to happen for Black people in this moment? And how can we use our collective political power? How can we actually say that Black people in Buffalo should be in a conversation with Black folks in the Bronx, right? Okay. That the issues that we face are the same issues. How do we actually do that and fight moving forward? Those are the questions that we're in, and we're really excited to talk to a lot of your listeners and get them on board, because we know that they're not just New York City listeners, that the Amsterdam News is worldwide, and we just got a little statewide operation that we want y'all to get down with.
Okay. Well, listen, ladies, thank you so much for telling us all this information. It's so important that we get to know this. I just don't think it's right that this particular story about what's happening in our prisons, you're hearing about it, you're hearing about the releases, but we're not hearing about the specifics of the conditions that are happening in our prisons. So I really, really appreciate both of you taking us inside and giving us that look of what is going on so that we can hopefully get some change as this progresses, because there's no doubt that the numbers are going to grow inside prison and outside prison. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much
for
having us.
All right, thanks. That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.